Aloha, what's up everyone? Welcome to today's presentation of Ancient Oblivion, where today we're going to be studying and focusing on some Antiquetech. For those of you who don't know what that means, it's just a combination of two words, antique and technology, Antiquetech. And there's been a lot of different evidences, different examples of Antiquetech that have popped up over the years. So while technology is getting a bit out of control these days, I'm thankful that we live during a time where we still have access and we're able to research and look things up while we still can, while we can still make sure that these things are even true, because we live during a time where it's difficult to believe anything. You know what I mean? So a lot of the research that some of us older people have been doing, it aligns with research we've been doing our entire lives. Things, you know, just our experiences, but studies and stuff like that back before there was AI and back before, you know, things were so out of hand as they are today. Not to say that this didn't always exist, but bells are what we're going to talk about today. Moshi Man just joined the Good Vibe Tribe. Oh, he just donated a membership. And actually that reminds me, I want to say thank you to the last person that signed up for Patreon to join the credits. We ain't having it. We ain't having it. Welcome to my Patreon. All right, cool. So we're going to talk about bells today. But before we go straight to bells, and is this ancient technology, which I completely believe that it is. Like, after doing this research, I totally believe that this is ancient technology. What's up, Carrie? I'm actually going to slide the alerts down to the side so that they don't block the picture real quick. One sec. Scooby-Doo. All right, let me test that out. Let's do test a subscriber. Kevin, your standard subscriber. There it is. All right, cool. That's perfect. All right, sweet. So let's take a trip down memory lane. I'm just going to remind you guys of what we're talking about when we talk about Antiquetech. All right, ancient technology. Now, in the modern world, especially in your academic school systems, they let you assume a great many things. They teach you a great many things, like cavemen were stupid and they clubbed women around and drugged them around by their hair. That people lived shorter and shorter lives the further back in time you go. That people were shorter and shorter in stature. When in reality, we go through cycles and rhythms of all of these new things. Good to see everybody who's joining. I'm just going to high five everybody in advance, because I made membership $1, so a lot of people are going to be joining. All right, cool. Very nice. All right, sweet. So anyways, here's some examples of Antiquetech, right? We're going to start with architecture, okay? Architecture that thankfully we have photographs and evidence of, even early video, going all the way back into the 1700s, the 1800s. We're going to start with the modern era and work our way all the way back to the Dark Ages, one of my favorite times. So as you can see, you know, people were building these great works of art in the form of buildings, architecture. They put love into these things. Today's architecture is a bunch of Legos. It's just square blocks and bricks, but that's not the way it always used to be. So, for example, we've got, you know, back in the Wild West days, we've got Chicago looking like this. A lot of people have discovered that there was founders, that people found America. They talk about the founding fathers and stuff. They really try to install this sense of family by calling them fathers. Those people are not my fathers. Okay, they try to make it sound like that's our football team or something, you know, that those are all of our fathers. They're not mine at all. I don't claim them. They may try to claim me, but as I'm going to show you, they parade you guys around like your products. All right. But anyways, this is what people were doing. There were clearly, when you look at the building structures, clearly and evidently working with ambient electricity that existed in the earth and in the atmosphere, which was amplified at the time. And a huge thank you to Carrie, who just donated $50 in the chat. Thank you so much. That was very kind of you. But check this one out, for example, right? We've got these arches, these massive arches that are eerily similar to, and probably are, horseshoe magnets, which is the strongest type of magnet you can have, aside from making it three-dimensional and having a bowl magnet. Speaking of bowl magnets, you've got all these gigantic bowls on top of these buildings, these domes. The domes, the obelisks, the spires, the pointed tops, the Gothic styles, the columns, all of these things. Even on top, there's water courses and stuff that lead through, like circuitry, to cool off certain elements, which is the energy that's being drawn from the earth and from the sky above. This one right here also, I mean, look at see the obelisks that they have. And there's, there's been a lot of debate. There's almost always a waterway in front of these obelisks, just to point that out, okay? And on the other side of this waterway, I guarantee there's going to be a dome. It's electrical in nature. It's electromagnetic. But anyways, there's debate, and I really don't care to join any debate. I'm not here to argue with people. There's going to be people who are going to defend academics nail and tooth, like in the Matrix, where he says every one of these people will fight for the system that they live in. They don't want their reality to be shattered, right? Here's a picture called the Illumination aux Champs-Élysées. This is from the 18th of July in 1790. And you could find all kinds of old newspaper articles and drawings and stuff where they showed you historic records of lights and electricity at the time, right? If you try to ask people, they'll say, oh no, that's, those are lamps and that's fire, that they put all that fire on the obelisk. These are people sitting at the base of it in front of the fire, right? Here's another example. Antiquetech, ancient technology, people working with electricity far before they say that the light bulb was invented. If you try to ask AI, especially, like I'm getting to my wit's end with AI. I don't know if I can even really, I don't know how much longer I'm going to be able to even use it as a useful tool. Because it's bad. It's really bad. But if you ask AI, or if you even ask your teachers, okay, go to your local academics and professors and ask them who invented the light bulb. They're going to say it's Edison. That's been programmed into their mind. Thomas Edison invented the first light bulb. That's garbage. That's like George Washington had wooden teeth, or Benjamin Franklin flew a kite in an electrical storm. Like, none of this crap is true. There's zero truth to any of it, okay? These people, this is a drawing from, I can't remember the date. I want to say mid-1700s, 1750, sometime around there, right? And then people will look at stuff like this and they'll say, oh, well, it's just fireworks. They had fireworks back then. Yeah, well, let's take a closer look at these guys with swords. They're wearing Faraday cage equipment, and there's literal electricity shooting out of their swords. Okay, this guy, I imagine, would probably have like a mesh hat or mesh, coating in front of his face or whatever. Anyways, yeah, this is all ancient technology, and they would have you believe that this was the Wild West. You know what I mean? Like, people had no actual technology back then. Of course, we've got the Tartarian fireplaces. Right? So if you haven't heard of these, the strange things about these is that there's not a lot of evidence of them being used for any kind of fire. That fires, it's almost like fires weren't really needed at the time. Instead, we see these two things on the left and the right. Usually have a ball on the top with a little spire on top of the ball right there. Here's one on this side, and here's a couple of them on the other side. You can find images like this across the internet. I believe that these are electrical arcing lanterns, basically, that these act as electrical arcs between the two, and that there's a hole in the house to allow the ambient electricity that existed in the atmosphere, which is going to be crucial to understanding the bells and the technology of the bells, that our atmosphere goes through fluctuations of being electrically charged and amplified electromagnetically. So we get an electrical arc that zaps right between these two things, providing light and heat. And they didn't need to like burn stuff in the house for heat. And then, of course, we've got pod people. That's what these are. Like, These are pod people. So some people have heard of the Cabbage Patch Kids, you know, the Cabbage Patch Babies, the toy. The toy was based off of the concept in the early 1800s, late 1700s, that children came from cabbages, that they were born in cabbages. And, you know, there's been many different YouTube channels that have really gone into this, as far as like just showing you hundreds and hundreds of examples of all of these cabbage babies. You know, this was as popular as the stork dropping off a baby, right? That the stork would leave a baby on your baby step, which my theory on that is, you know, the storks used to fight the pygmies and they would scoop some of them up sometimes. But anyways, these are pod people. Okay, this says 1800 cloning on this little thumbnail that I ripped off the internet. That's because that's what that is. I'm convinced. Like these people were born in pods and they had the technology to make clones in underground facilities, right? And then they just bring them up to the surface after a cataclysm and they repopulate the world. I mean, it's Occam's razor to me. It seems like that's the simplest answer. I don't believe that there's any good reason for people to portray all of these people buying babies from cabbages. You know, I don't understand why people would even tell people that unless there was some kind of truth to it, you know. Otherwise, it's like telling your kids, you know, about Santa Claus and stuff like that. If they didn't show them being born in cabbages, they literally showed them being born in pods, which was eggs and other things too. They're just hatching right up out of that. And then they show you what families bore them or created them. See the top hats? See the kid reading like the stock exchange and the newspaper and stuff. This kid's got a pipe. He's like a future bureaucrat. You know, that's the message that's trying to be sent here, is that these are from the rich. You'll have a rich elite baby born in pods, right? Underground. So we have this rise, and this is just the modern times. Okay, we're working our way back. We have this rise in children out of nowhere. Right? Right around the time that they're just settling the United States and the West and stuff like that. They have all of these babies popping up. They started building insane asylums, just flourishing everywhere. That was like the popular business, was insane asylums. And you could put anybody into a crazy house, into a loony bin, for any reason whatsoever. We've gone over hundreds of ridiculous reasons that people were locked up and experimented on, like a horror movie. This was reality. This is evidence of the time we live in, called the season of Satan. This is the devil's work, okay? This is evil to me personally. I'm speaking from the heart right now, but damn, there's so much evidence that we live during this so-called, you know, negatively charged time, or the season of Satan. Anyways, they started making babies all over the place. People, humans. I mean, creating them. It's not like they were, making them the old-fashioned way. They were making people, like in test tubes and pods and crap like that. And then they started showcasing the babies, holding them like they're actual Cabbage Patch Kids. When they see people holding these infants in these older pictures, they're holding them like they're products instead of like they're people. Like, if you had a baby, like, I'm going to hold it, like, I'm going to worry about it, care for it, hold it with some kind of care. Not these guys that are like, look, we've got babies for sale. You know what I mean? So they started selling these babies. We've got other types of ancient technology in the form of airships, right? Not just blimps, but I mean like, air pirates with boats attached to balloons and stuff like that. Here's a guy again. Check it out. I got some babies. I just hold them by their freaking little baby necks. You know what I mean? Like, they're holding these people like they're products because they were. Like, they literally sold babies back then. All these weird airships, nobody uses these days. What happened to that, right? Well, I believe that there was a change in the atmosphere that made it possible for propulsion as opposed to just flying around in balloons, right? I believe that changes the increase in pressure that exists in our atmosphere. If you have a decrease in pressure, or less pressure, right, you're going to have more of a misty beginning, like we see during the Dark Ages, and like we see during the Purple Dawn and other things. But as that pressure increases, it gets easier and easier to propel yourself through the sky. using propellers, right? Rocketry and stuff like that. Here's another weird one where he's just holding the baby as far away as possible. Like, look what I have one of these things, you know? Just the strangest stuff that they were doing. Working with genetics hundreds of years ago. Electricity hundreds of years ago. Gigantic airships. Balloons was common. Which is weird to me because I've never been in a hot air balloon. I don't have any desire to be in a hot air balloon because it sounds like it's difficult to control. But yeah, they had hot air balloons all over the place. They had the, what do you call them? The orphan trains, right? Just a rise in the population. There was like hundreds of thousands of children shipped. Not hundreds of thousands of orphans across the United States alone, which this happened in Europe and other places too. But hundreds of thousands of children shipped specifically from like New York and, you know, a couple of different cities in the East Coast off to the West Coast to be slaves. Let's just be clear about that. It wasn't like, you know, the people in the West, you know, they were too busy. It was the economy was bad and they didn't want to have children and they were waiting for the right time or they couldn't and they were all shooting blanks or whatever. No, man. They wanted workers. These are slaves that were bred and produced and raised and taught, and their worldview was skewed and their perceptions were filtered. So, you know, here's another really interesting one. Hey, thanks, Mad Pax. High five to you. Here's another one, interesting one too. Now, what do you notice about this photograph of the hot air balloon? Like I said, the Zeppelin, I don't know what airship, whatever kind of airship this is. Let me zoom in on this, okay? Check this out. Do you notice anything about this? Right? Yeah. It looks like there's electricity like in the air. You can see it. I don't know. I asked ChatGPT and it thinks that this is, you know, just artifacts from an old photograph. That looks like electricity coming off this thing to me. But that only further, if it is electricity, it only further solidifies my theory that, what are you doing? One sec here. Only further solidifies my theory that the atmosphere was more electrically amplified at the time. This is a real picture. This woman, it's kind of hard to see her, but I'll show you. She's just covering her face because somebody's taking her photograph and she's super embarrassed because she's just selling kids. Right? Back to before the Dust Bowl, they just sold people. Right? They're white, by the way. You know, take a good hard look. All right? Like, slavery doesn't just apply to any particular color or anything, okay? A matter of fact, every one of these kids that I've seen, that I personally have seen, and I've done a lot of research on it, from the orphan trains, were all Caucasian, okay? And they are all made to be slaves. They were all sent off. Like, the whole movie The Wizard of Oz is about one of them. It's about an orphan train survivor, or however you want to see it. Dorothy, right? That's what she is. You don't hear crap about Dorothy's mom and dad, do you? Well, what do you think, right? Why do you think they start the movie showing you that she's out slaving away, doing all the work for Uncle Fred or whatever that dude's name was? More airships, right? Literal boats tied to strings to giant balloons. Ancient technology. They had the technology to build huge underground reservoirs, or came upon pre-existing underground reservoirs, and by reservoirs I mean cities, hollow spaces, openings under the earth, the hollow earth, right? We go through these cycles of cataclysms, and every cycle you would expect that people are going to try to go underground and retreat underground. So whenever it's time to come back up to the surface, it's not like they're going to fill it all in, like the underground bunkers and stuff. They're not going to like, oh, we don't need that anymore. Heck no. They're going to like come to the surface and forget all about the underground laboratories and stuff, which later on, the people who know will return there and they'll start preparing and, you know, getting ready for things. So here's another example of the electrical arcing fireplace technology. Which, I mean, look at just the style of the fireplaces and stuff too, right? A lot of times it's like gold plated, bronze plated, copper plated, a lot of conductive materials. Here's more of the orphans from the orphan trains. You can't, I mean, there's so much evidence that history is complete fabrication, man. Just manipulated and made up. That nothing we're told is true. That it's just we've been conditioned and conditioned and conditioned through what, like at least 15 years of schooling, of garbage, of worthless crap that doesn't help us, that to be productive, to be independent, to be able to become inventors and, you know, business owners or whatever. No, you're born and raised to be a slave, a worker. Now let's get back to the architecture. So this right here is showing you inside of cathedrals. Everyone I've ever looked up, they almost always have organs, huge, massive pipe organs that line the wall. It's not just like an organ off to the side, like a little one or whatever. These places are giant and echoey in the first place. You don't need huge, massive pipes lining the walls for everyone to hear the music, I promise. If you've ever been in one of these places, you know how echoey they are. They're loud. Any little sound is amplified. But they line the walls with these things, right? Gigantic stone buildings. And we're going to get into more aspects of the cathedrals here in a second. But clearly, there's frequency, there's resonance, not just music to listen to you know, to nod my head and say praise God and amen and all that stuff. No. This is technology. This is cymatics. This is acoustical resonance, right? That's working throughout the people's bodies who go into these places. There's a reason why they have stained glass windows. It's not because they're pretty. It's not just because, oh, it's just lovely to look at and we just want God's house to look lovely. It's practical. Everything you're looking at had a practicality behind it. That means you could use it for something aside from it just looking beautiful. They made them all the practical things look beautiful, but don't look beyond. I mean, look beyond the beauty. See past that. See the the symmetry and the mathematics and the science and the technology that is clearly evident in these designs, especially when you see the same design over and over and over, like this Dreamcatcher spiderweb design in the window, right behind the thing that's going to be manipulating electromagnetics within the building. Why would they put this same exact design right behind all these pipe organs time and time and time and time again? And line them with stained glass. Which, by the way, if you look at the stained glass, they're not just regular window panes either. They've got metal running throughout them. Right? This is basically a gigantic dream catcher. I think dream catchers were used to actually trap plasma, like circuit boards. They're used to keep the plasma stuck in one particular area to harness the energy, basically, right? Yeah, there's reasons why that they're building these, and they have these schematics built this way because they're clearly following electromagnetic patterns, right? Many people have come to the conclusion these were healing centers. I agree with them. I completely agree. Why? Because it's a gigantic building with the roof design and everything in it designed to amplify the resonant frequency that exists. And then they're tuning it on top of it. That's the music portion of it. And then on the bottom, if you go look underneath the pews, you'll see these little school bell looking things, right? These are vents underneath. You know why they need vents underneath? To vent in the stuff on top of the cave that they built it on top of. These gases, the ionized plasmas, the earth-giving, the life-giving earth geoplasmas, which do things to the body with an ambient electrical charge, like cellular regeneration, right? Fixing your skin, making your skin stretchy again and bounce back and bringing youth back to you and making you more intelligent and ridding you of diseases and bacterias. And these were healing centers. I promise you that. I've gone myself and investigated. This is a whole video I did about a local cathedral that we have here in Colorado Springs, and I was checking out these weird bell-looking things on the bottom, right? And I asked the curator what they were, and she's let me know that's to let air up from underneath the church to cool it off, because there's no windows. Well, that's weird. Why wouldn't you even have windows if it's just a building? Of course you would. You got doors, right? Why not windows? And I don't mean stained glass windows. I mean the type of windows you can open and close. On the gigantic stained glass windows, they have little hatches that are not for looking outside. It's for releasing some of the energy so that you can keep the levels correct inside of these healing centers. Like I said, huge, gigantic stained glass windows that for the most part cannot be opened or closed, gigantic walls and huge structures designed to work with resonance and frequency and electromagnetics and cymatics, right? And if you think about, that there would be lights on the other side if the atmosphere was electromagnetically charged, I would expect there to be auroras all over the place. I would expect there to be plasma filaments just snaking their way around the skies, dragons about, and they would light these things up, right? Here they are again. Just look at the architecture, look at the science, look at the technology necessary during a time before, how does my lunch break say it? Carts and wagons and donkeys and hammers. That's a good point. High five, bro. High five. Look at this one. This one literally has the apex dome up there, quote unquote Nibiru or whatever. And then of course underneath almost all these buildings we have catacombs, right? They just tossing a bunch of dead bones in here. I heard Understanding Conspiracy and JT Follows JC. I was just listening to them right before I started this one, and they were talking about these catacombs, right? Why would people dump all these dead bones and bodies and stuff underneath the holiest sites, right? In the Bible, in the Old Testament, if you have something that's unclean, you're supposed to keep that far away from anything holy. What's going on, right? And on top of that, this is quite the enigma itself. Is just the amount of bones and skulls and stuff that were removed, exhumed from existing perfectly good graveyards. And they try to say, oh, well, no, it's because of the plague. If you look up the dates of, these plagues that happened from the time of the bones being exhumed, it's like 100 years later. The bones would be dust. Okay, bodies turn into dust when you bury them underground. Within like 50 years or less, 20, sometime right around that time period. Not 100, 200 years later. You can't just go dig up the bones. They're not going to be there. These are fresh. Okay? These are from the times. Anyways, they took all these dead people and they put them in these cave systems. And they didn't dig underneath here. They might have walled it up or whatever, but these were pre-existing cavernous systems. And the gases come up from underneath the cave systems. They're ionized, and those ionized gases rejuvenate the cellular structure. They turn them back on. They turn the bones as human battery parts back on, and the bones start to regrow. The next part, the subsequent part, they basically activate the stem cells, and the body knows what to do. Okay, it's same process as being born. Okay, same process as conception. All you need to do is run life through it, which is spirit, which is electromagnetic plasma, basically. And I mean, in my opinion, right? But they'll start growing. The bones will start to grow back together, and people will be born again. They'll come back, and you'll have a rise of people that will come right up out of God's holy building, church or whatever, right? They'll come right up out of the ground. And this is the entrance into the underworld, built on top of these places. Remember Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, right? Where they went, they'll repurpose these buildings, all of them. It's not just cathedrals, okay? These are all places of power. They're all ancient technology in gigantic building form, right? Designed as tools to help out the existing population, or specifically the elite of the world, right? Remember Indiana Jones? They take these places of power, and they either are starting to get rid of them, or hide them or repurpose them by slapping a different name on them. Like they'll turn them into libraries or they'll turn them into museums, and they'll say, oh, this section's off limits, you know, under here or whatever. But you can walk around up here, or you can take a guided tour or whatever, right? Same thing. And this is another place of power. They're not all holy sites. So many of them are political sites because the elite are political. And they rule the world from these types of places. These buildings that you're looking at with all these columns and pillars and domes and stuff, they don't build it like that because they just really loved the ancient Greco-Roman artistic style. They were just patrons of the arts. My butt, man. They built it like this for a purpose and with a purpose in mind because it was practical during the time that they lived in, or they're preparing for a time when it will be practical once more. Right? And I've talked about the domes and stuff like that and how they attract electricity from the air, right? Let's take a look at this one. This is the United States Capitol building. Every Capitol building in the United States looks like this. You would think that they would all have their own unique designs or something. No, every one of them is built with the same type of architectural style and structure with the domes. Not just domes, but domes that have, you know, interesting frescoes and stuff on the inside. So if you're inside of this building right here, the United States Capitol building, you look up, the whole building is dedicated to George Washington, who I don't even think existed. But if you look up, you'll see this mural called the Apotheosis of Washington, which means making Washington into a god. That's literally what that means. And it's inside of their gigantic machine. When you look up at this gigantic machine, which acts as like a bowl magnet whenever you run electricity through it, and you take a look, you got Washington right here in the middle. Everybody looks at Washington. They don't pay attention to the rest of this, which is all these other gods that are in this picture, like you know, Ares and what's his name, Poseidon, and all those other gods, right? But they just focus on Washington. What's he doing in the sky? Right? Why? Wait a minute, is there a map behind him? There is. Is that map the map of the Hyperborean circular country that's depicted on almost every medieval map that I've ever seen, but specifically Mercator's, you know, map of the Arctic? Yes, it is. That's the Garden of Eden, which is reflected off of the apex dome, which is at the top of the firmament. It reflects the land right below it, which is this land right there. Anyways, let's continue with the U.S. Capitol building being a type of a place of power, right? A machine, essentially, designed to harness natural earth-giving energy to bring people back to life, to preserve their lives, to extend their lives, etc. Underneath the Capitol building, they have a crypt. The exact same, in the same manner as the, what do you call them? The cathedrals, right? So if you go to the U.S. Capitol building, you're standing on top of a crypt. A crypt is, you know, a crypt literally means hidden, which there's all kinds of underground hidden rooms and tunnels and stuff under these places. Every one of your Capitol buildings is built on top of an existing tunnel, I promise. Here's more evidence of ancient technology in the form of architecture. Like I said, you've got the dome on one side. You always have this long rectangular stretch that leads to an obelisk. And usually across from the obelisk, you'll have a long rectangular stretch of water, right? And usually some kind of dome structure on the other side as well, right? And there's another dome over here. Here's every U.S. Capitol building. Check these out. Do you see a similar theme? Right? I do. Oh, maybe this one stands out a little bit. I don't know. But geez, look at all these different things, man. That one looks like a battery. Like there's no hiding that they were working with ambient electrical currents, amplified electrical currents, already existing in the atmosphere not too long ago. And then those currents started dissipating as the earth was charging. C'est moi. This is down in Pueblo, Colorado, when I took my son to the sand dunes. I saw this massive building. And this place is the ghetto. I don't know if it's always been a ghetto. Like Pueblo is pretty I don't know. It's kind of yucky in my opinion. It's like a suburb of a suburb of a suburb. But anyway, they have this massive courthouse. But if you look close, they also have the freaking Statue of Liberty. How many of you guys have seen Statue of Liberty replicas like everywhere? I have. I've seen them in Colorado Springs. I've seen them down in the other cities. Like every city has to have their own little Statue of Liberty. Interesting. Here's another one that I visited. This is in Colorado Springs. Not only do they have the ancient technology in the form of the architecture, by the way, if we zoom in on this, you can see these little Hershey's Kisses things that are on top of the roof on this little portico right here. Yeah, well, you'll see this all over the place throughout the ancient world. These were practical. These were not just pretty designs. That I don't think it's pretty at all, actually. It's kind of in the way, right? But these serve a purpose, okay? Remember the electrical arc thingies that were in the fireplace? Think about that, right? Back during the time whenever they didn't have light bulbs. This is a portico where people would walk around at night, and you don't want to fall off the roof. You need some light, right? And then, of course, we've got the clock tower with bells inside of it. So we usually see the same type of structure. There's an obelisk, a gigantic hollowed out obelisk. Let's be honest, that's what that is. With a clock on it that seems to be have electrical systems in place, or things that are designed to manipulate electricity and redirect their flow, like the columns and stuff, these little Hershey's Kiss deals. I don't know what to call those. And in here, by the way, in this open air section that they insist, you know, the open air, this section right here needs to be exposed to the elements. You know why? That's where they keep the bells. This is the bell tower portion, right? And at the top, of course, they have a very conductive material in the shape of a dome. Now, I'll come back to the bell towers in just a second. This huge, gigantic, magnificent, metallic structure that looks like it's used to work with electrical fields in the atmosphere, even to somebody that doesn't even know anything about electronics at all. Millions of people, all these little sleepwalkers walking around thinking it means nothing. It's just pretty. It's not pretty. It's a big chunk of just scrap. That's not pretty. Are you serious? We can recognize the beauty in it because we see the mathematics in it. We see the symmetry that exists there. But people have been hypnotized not to think that this itself isn't some practical thing that was built with a purpose in mind to work with, you know, the electrical fields of the earth. This is a huge tower, and they're just trying to say, oh, it's just random design. It's really meaningless. It's just art. This is another version, but then just like in the same manner that they have all these statues of liberties all over the place, they also have Eiffel Towers all over the place. Various countries have the Eiffel Tower, not just France. Which, by the way, the Statue of Liberty came from France, and they have a Statue of Liberty in France themselves. But anyways, this is the original design of the Eiffel Tower. It was supposed to have these two things on the sides. Check them out. See those two things on the sides? Look like little Hershey's Kisses. Off to the sides right there. There it is again. There it is again. We're starting to see common themes in this technology that existed. But we can go even further back. We can go back into the ancient Far East, where they built buildings that looked like conductors and capacitors and things that were designed to repel and store energy, repelling it, storing it, drawing it closer, right? And they built these cities right near these ancient terrestrial places of power. These volcanoes, Mount Fuji and stuff like that. You wonder why people, you know, have major cities around so many active volcanoes, right? Or any volcano. If a volcano is and always was simply just a place where explosions could possibly happen, full of melted hot rock, then nobody would ever settle there. Nobody would. It would just be counterintuitive, okay? But at some point, they weren't. At some point, there was a reason to settle at the base of these massive power plants, because they themselves are the unfinished pyramid. okay? Light came out of these. Poles and pillars of ionized gases. Lightning shot up out of these mountains. And it provided healing benefits to those who lived around it. These were the first cities, actually. Now, back to man's attempt to copy what nature naturally does. Look at these building styles. The architecture, the Gothic architecture. Now, there's bell towers in these. You can see the bell towers in these cathedrals. We'll just focus on cathedrals because they're easy. But you see these bell towers? See all the spikes on the top up here? When you see spikes, and I just want to be very clear about this, because since teaching people this concept, I have realized by reading the comments that many people do not, you have all been duped. You have all been misled when it comes to the concept of a lightning rod and how a lightning rod works. All right. So for example, these buildings are examples of lightning rods. Okay. So let's say that this was built during a time when the atmosphere was electrically amplified, which it was. They would not want the building to be struck. Some building designs, some building types like domes naturally attract charge, which if you build a dome, that means that's where you want the energy to go. You want it to hit the dome so you can harness that charge. If you see spires like this, they are not designed to draw electricity to it like a lightning rod or obelisks. It works the exact opposite way. We correlate the lightning rod with the ground that is attached to the lightning rod just in case it does get hit by lightning, which is possible, right? Depends on how strong the electrical charge is above, or the negative charges that builds up above it. But what this does, what lightning rods do, is they actually release off of their points, which if you were to look at these 2 points right here, you would actually find that they're made of multiple points all over this building. This whole building is studded with little metallic points. Off of every single one of those metallic points, it flows positive ions up into the atmosphere, which dissipates, it mixes with and floods that negative charge, which basically gets it to go away. So it helps to prevent a strong negative buildup, which will lead to a lightning bolt. You know what I mean? So you see all these pointy towers and stuff like that. That's what they're made for. They don't want this house to get hit by lightning. They don't want this to get struck by electricity. During a time whenever the atmosphere was electrically charged. Now, in addition, we also have towers. Oftentimes, these bell towers, they themselves will have the lightning rods on the top, and it's in the form of spires and spikes and cones and pointed Hershey's Kiss shapes and all that fun stuff, right? So here's a few different types of bell towers. Oftentimes, you will have a clock on there, right? Just like in Back to the Future, it's the same exact thing being shown to us, right? So let's take a look at some of these ones. You'll notice that they have huge open windows. Now remember, the cathedrals, they don't have open windows. They make a point to keep that place sealed up nice and tight, except for the bell towers. Open that up. Let those bells be exposed to the atmosphere. Well, why would that be? Especially on these towers where you've got all these little rods sticking out, this Gothic spiky style. Those spikes, like I said, help it to prevent electrical strikes. Remember that. The Leaning Tower of Pisa is no exception. And it looks like a battery to me personally. It looks like it's designed to allow electricity to flow through that. But I'm an apprentice electrician. I just study these things for fun. But I know they have bells up there in the top. And then now there's connections with holy bells. Right? Bells are seen as a holy sign, that they are connected especially to the different religions of the world. They're seen as a positive thing, even though one of the major, pagan gods is named Bel or Baal. But that's another story. The Catholics, especially, they have all of these bells. They sanctify these bells. They baptize these bells. They will bless these bells and put spells on them. Why? Because they're weapons. These bells originally, remember, as the conditions of our atmosphere change over time, we forget about the origins of why these things were created. It just becomes tradition. You know, we got to have a steeple. We're building a church. We got to have a steeple. We got to have a bell tower. You know, we don't really need one these days because the conditions have changed. Unless you're preparing for the days to come, of course. So let's take a look at these weapons. What were bells used to fight against? These were Antiquetech. These were an ancient form of technology during a time whenever people made buildings that looked like something out of Edward Scissorhands or the Addams Family. They have these huge towers that shoot up into the sky. This is an area they wanted to protect. During a time when the atmosphere was electrically charged, when the atmosphere was electrically charged, that is the time whenever you have tales of dragons and fiery flying serpents moving about in the sky, undulating all on their own. These are plasma filaments. Auroras, the glory of God, is how the people called it. Glory means glowing. It literally means light. Right? The light of the heavens descended upon the earth. And they needed to protect certain structures in certain areas. And the intelligent ones, the inventors of their times, designed certain areas to harness that power. Now you see all these more Hershey's Kiss shapes like this? These repel. Okay? The shape right here keeps it away. Especially when it's got gold on the top, copper on the top, any type of conductor. And here's the tower, which in and of itself also helps. So you put all these little spikies up here. They don't want electricity near this area. If you see a dome, they want electricity near that area. Sometimes they incorporate both. But let's focus on these bells. Like I said, notice how it's nice and open, right? You got windows up here, but what's up with the bell, right? You want it to rust out? They need it. They need it. Not just, I know what some people are thinking, well, you know, the bells were just to let everyone know lunch was ready at the church. No. It's Sunday, ring the bell. You know, we didn't have alarm clocks back then, so nobody knows to come to church on Sunday unless we ring the bell. No. The bell was to call town meetings. Yes, all these things over time, I'm sure, but not originally. Originally, they wrote on the bell what they were made for. They had an engraving on all of these bells. There's a reason why they want one side of the bell to be exposed to the atmosphere and the other side, but not over here, right? They're working with the electrical charge that's in the air. There's a reason why they're made out of these conductive materials. There's a reason why they hang them on big fat pieces of wood, wooden planks, originally, for the most part. See that? Wood. You know why it's wood? Because they don't want the electricity, the electrical charge of the building to touch the bell. Wood is a poor conductor of electricity. They want that bell to have the charge of the atmosphere around it. Well, why, I wonder? Because it needs to work and affect, it needs to work with and affect the atmosphere that's around it. Here's another example of these bells on the inside. Here's another one. Now, I'm going to show you these engravings on the bell, this writing on the bell. The bells used to tell you exactly what they were used for. This thing down here, by the way, is called a clapper. So if you clap on and clap off the clapper, that's the thing inside the bell, the dinghy, right? These bells were originally weapons put onto the holy places to keep them safe, especially places of power that were being full of gas from the inside the earth. So start putting these two and two together. You got a whole bunch of your fellow human beings inside of a container that's full of gas, ionized gas, earth geoplasmas, and they're in there singing and worshiping and having cellular regeneration like Quantum Leap and Doctor Who and whatever, you know what I mean? They're in there having a good time. Last thing you want is for a gigantic negatively charged fireball to blow it up. Okay. Now, those gigantic negatively charged fireballs are dragons. They go by many different names. Folklore gave them all kinds of descriptions. They were dragons, sometimes giants, sometimes seen as titans, sometimes seen as ogres or trolls. Now, like I said, sometimes symbolism splits. Sometimes there really were giants, physical humanoids. But over time, people projected that onto phenomenon that they didn't understand, which is electromagnetics and plasma physics. So anyways, we've got all these different bell towers, you know, in these places of power where they needed to protect people. Did they use them for other things, like to call meetings or, you know, alert the fire department or whatever it may be? Yes, over time. Okay, as the original meanings were lost. And the reason that the original meaning was lost is because the electrical charge in the atmosphere dissipates over time. It gets lower and lower and lower until it's sucked into the ground and it goes down into the hollow recesses of the earth. Then only the hollow earth denizens benefit from all that power. And we start shrinking up here on the surface and we become consumers, needing more energy. We start sleeping all day long. We fall asleep up here on the top while they're wide awake down below us. Here's an interesting drawing within a book that I found. It's got a bell towers right there in the middle, and they were using it to fight dragons. And it's this was written in, like, I think ancient German. I had to get it translated, but it was about this inventor. It was actually a poet, right? This poet was also sort of an inventor, and he was requested to go to this city that was encircled by this wall, as you can see, and they were being plagued with dragons. Now let's take a look at these quote-unquote dragons. When I say dragons, I don't mean flying lizards. Okay? Notice how there are no arms. Originally, dragons were snakes in the air, or worms. They had no back legs, no front legs, no ears, no horns, no nothing. Okay? This head right here is ridiculous looking, because we're used to seeing more of like a dragon head. These ones look like they have dog heads. All right, people couldn't figure out what the head was supposed to look like, so they started making different versions until finally one of them stuck. Now we've got like a traditional dragon face that we have all come to know and love. But they don't have heads, okay? They're just plasma filaments flying through the air, right? They're attracted to places of power and human beings. As a matter of fact, they could smell the blood of Christians, aka good people, or, you know, real Christians, not like anyone that just says that they're a Christian, but they could sense electromagnetic charge, yours. They could smell you. They could detect you. It's not that they were actually smelling, okay? And they were looking for areas that had gases too, because that's what plasma eats. It's made of gas and it eats gas. Anyways, they would ring the bells in these towers. And sometimes some cities had massive towers, like ancient New York's looking skyscraper cities. This is one of them, an ancient, this is somewhere in Northern Europe. I forgot exactly where. This is what it looks like today. They've got two left. This one's a remnant of one, and this one is still there from a long time ago. But hundreds of years ago, the entire city looked like this, like downtown New York City. Which makes me wonder why they have skyscrapers in the first place, right? Is it related? Yeah, this is an interesting read, this particular city. I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. Maybe somebody in the chat can find it for us. But yeah, they used to have skyscrapers. They're just cities with towers all over the place. It's amazing. Here's another version. So these obelisk shapes, they put these in the city centers. That's not a place where you want a thunderbolt from the god to strike, right? This will have a bell. This will have bells on the inside of it. Here's another example. This guy in the tower fighting the dragon. Now look at the dragon. The dragon is plasma. The Middle Ages, the Dark Ages, were times where the atmosphere was electrically amplified. And you could fight a dragon with a sword easily, because a sword is a lightning rod. It puts out all those positive ions and it dissipates the negative charge in front of it. That's why this dragon is so easily killed by a simple sword. Notice there's no arms, no legs. They put wings on it to let you know it can fly. They didn't actually have wings. They weren't birds. They weren't reptiles. They weren't animals. They were spirit slithering around in the sky. So we get back to religion and the religious use to combat these plasmas during a time whenever the glory of the heavens laid low upon the earth, which meant that it was let me give you guys a more recent example. The Carrington effect, right? The Carrington event. Also Tunguska, okay? I completely believe that Tunguska was an explosion of ionized gases out in Siberia. But the Carrington event is more well known. That's the time whenever the auroras stretched so far and came so close to the Earth that it took over the machines that people had at the time, communication devices that were used from country to country, took them over. They were possessed. The machines were possessed by spirit from above. The glory of the Lord descended and took control of the machines. Think about that, because let that settle in. That's going to happen again, and we've got way more machines this time. And those machines attacked people. And people were hurt, electrocuted, burned by the machines. That's going to happen again. So, it happened a long time ago, during the Dark Ages. They realized, they looked into it scientifically. They didn't just already have bells to call people to lunch, and they realized, oh, the bell is doing something to the dragons. No, they built these as weapons to combat the dragons, to combat the trolls. They purposefully put them between the stones and allowed them access to the open air. Not so that the town could hear them, they purposefully hung them upon wooden beams to keep the charge of the building off of the device, which is what it is. It's a device. They put them inside of obelisks, lightning rods, natural designs that mankind copied into building style obelisks. Here you can see more of them. So you'll have the belfry, you'll have the tower, the steeple, the clock on there. I assume the clock is on there just to let you know what time it was struck, if it was struck, because it would probably stop the clock, right? So they can keep a record of these things. Here's another one. You got the spire on the top portion. That's the actual lightning rod that's flooding out all the positive ions. Then you have the light tower. That's another thing too, is they would have fire. They would incorporate fire into these things. So you would have, like some kind of fire up there. And the fire actually helps to combat plasmas as well. Then you have a bell tower. This is like a gigantic gun that's facing up to fight dragons, basically. If you want to see it like that. So spire, lantern, belfry, and the tower itself, the clock tower. Now, let's talk about this real quick. Hold on. Let me see. How much further do I got to go before I see my engravings? Oh, not too much further. All right, cool. Well, let me talk about the design here. So the pointy part at the top, it floods out positive ions, which dissipates the gigantic negative charge above it, which helps to prevent lightning strikes, not to attract it. They do have a rod on there, oftentimes, just in case it does get hit, which is possible, to redirect the current. Not to just safely allow it to pass into the earth and waste all that energy, but to allow it to go down into conductors. If you're smart, you're going to not just let that energy go to waste. They've got the spires, they've got the lantern, fire. Okay, whenever, let's say that the auroras descend. Let's say that the sky is electrically amplified and you've got plasmas all about in different forms. I'm going to show you different forms too. It's not just slithering snake filaments, but there were ball lightning plasmas, sprites. They got different names for the different forms of plasmas and transient luminous events and stuff, but there was all kinds of weird things that were in the sky, lights in the sky, spirits in the sky, right? That we today just consider to be mythic creatures or whatever, not real. And they needed protection from these things. Sometimes they worked with them. Sometimes they empowered people. If you caught a fairy or a sprite or whatever it may be, you could actually use it to empower yourself. You can get 3 wishes, right? You can use it 3 times, basically. The fires. So that if you light a fire around a strong electrical field, right, it'll fluctuate and it'll mess with and disrupt and disturb the pressure, which disturbs the electrical field in return, right? So they're using things that are disruptive to the electrical field, the belfry and the bell specifically. So when you ring that bell, let's just say it's manual. I don't believe that these were actually rung manually. initially. They eventually tied ropes to them and stuff so that you can ring them purposefully, especially whenever they lost their purpose because all the electrical energy is now being charged down into the earth. But I'm going to share stories with you of bells that rang all by themselves. They didn't have ropes attached to them. There was no wind or anything. They were ringing because of the electrical field in the air, right? Here's some different examples. Now, the reason that they expose these bells to the elements is not so that everyone in town can hear it. They put these bells everywhere. In like a 5-mile radius, you'd have all kinds of different bells, right? There would be bells all across the city, and they'd be ringing and ringing. There's stories that say that the bells got rid of storm clouds, that they would ring the bells, and there was like this tradition that they knew that it would break up the clouds somehow. Excuse me. Now, to be fair, later on, when the pressure builds up in our world, all the bell ringers started to get electrocuted. So they outlawed bell ringing during storms. But that's how prevalent it used to be. They knew to go ring that bell because you don't want people dying of electrical shock, right? But whenever you started to change the conditions of our world, people started to die from electrical shock because they're touching the bell, which is ionized. You know what I mean? But anyways, when you ring this bell, it sends out pulses. It sends out waves, compression waves, sound waves, right? This is an acoustic weapon to be used against naturally occurring plasmas that are in the air that people were afraid of because they would set fire to buildings like the dragons did, right? Or the fireworms, as they touched anything, they would set fire to it. They would shock things. They were known to petrify organic life forms like trees and people. So they would put these bells up there. Now, it's very possible that the bells, through the resonance within the the electricity that's in the atmosphere already, would just start to vibrate. And with that vibration, it increases and increases until the bell starts to hum. You don't even need the clapper deal. However, it's also possible that the clapper itself becomes polarized and attracted to each side of the bell, which would cause it to just start moving back and forth inside of the bell, right? So they put these things on castles and stuff, as you can see. This right here is a bell I want to share with you specifically. This bell is Antiquetech. This bell is in Oxford, I believe, the Oxford bell. This bell's been ringing for like over 200 years. Non-stop. You've got the clapper right there in the middle, and it just goes right back and forth between these two bells. Ding, 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 ding. This has been in use as a machine, powered by 2 batteries. Let me look it up. Let me tell you the exact year. Oxford electric bell. 1840. It's been continuously ringing since 1840. Almost 200 years. This bell has been ringing and working off of 2 batteries that have never gone dead. That's another thing too, right? They had better technology back then. All this Antiquetech is much better than ours of today, right? They made light bulbs that never went out. They made batteries that never stopped working. Now they're like, well, we can't make money off that. Let's make stuff that breaks so we can get rich. You selfish, evil, demonic devils. Anyway, the reason that this thing, the whole reason behind this is it's electrically powered, right? This thing touches this one and it takes on the electrical charge of it, which switches its own polarity, so it goes this way, and then it hits that one and takes on its polarity, and then it goes the other way, and it just keeps on going forever. 2 batteries that have never gone out. They don't recharge them ever. It's just the same battery. This right here, greatest ever, what's up, dude? Says it was believed that ringing church bells repelled lightning. They did. Here's the inscription I've been waiting to share with you. Let me read this Latin to you. I like reading Latin, Greek, all the ancient languages. Now, this might be kind of hard to see at first because of the font, but I'll just tell you what it says. This says fulgura. You see that? Fulgura. So, you know, all you video game lovers out there, you might recognize the character Fulgor from Killer Instinct. I don't know, I do. He was a very electrical character. Okay, his name was Fulgor. Fulgura means lightning. Electricity, basically. What's this other word? Frango. Fulgura frango. This was a Latin inscription that they put on many, many different bells during the Dark Ages. You know what that means? Fulgura frango? Anybody? 42 says, I can barely read pig Latin. Okay, well, I'll just tell you what it means. It means I break lightning, essentially. Let me see. Hold on, let me see. Just double check the literal meaning of it. Fulgura frango translates to I break the lightning or I repel lightning. And they put this on the bells during the medieval times. So the bells, on the bells, it says that they were Antiquetech, that they were a form of technology used to fight storms, weather manipulation. During the Dark Ages, when people were all stupid and lived in caves and walked around in the fog and played in the mud, making mud pies. I don't know. No, it's technology. That it was knowledge about electromagnetic fields and plasma physics and things of this nature. Now, this is a picture of a whole field of bells that were collected during World War... What was it? World War I? The one with Germany? I can't remember. I think it's World War I. Hitler... It's so funny. Like, all these YouTube channels I watch, they're scared to death to say Hitler's name. Or Nazis or Jews or anything like that. Everyone thinks their channel is going to get taken away immediately. Not that it won't happen. It's happened. It's just, it's all in how you say these things. You know what I mean? Like, it's all in, you know, not raising too many flags at once and all that stuff. Anyways, you know what I'm saying. So, Germany went around, their leader told them to go around and collect, steal all of the bells, specifically from cathedrals and churches, to put them, you know, towards the war effort. This is the mainstream story, is that all these bells were stolen, completely stolen, by Hitler. That he instructed his people to go steal all the bells, even the bells of his own people. He went and stole all those bells too and took them, right? Now, if they're weapons, and Hitler studied the occult, okay? It's not like he didn't know what he's doing. It's not like he just needed some metal to melt and make more tanks, okay? That's the story that you're told. You're also told that Germany, you know, took its entire Navy fleet down to Antarctica because they needed butter. So, I'm dead serious. Like, they went whaling down in Antarctica, you know, and took their whole Navy fleet down there to get some whale fat so they can have Nazi butter. Anyways, I don't really believe all these official stories that I'm told. I do think it's interesting that Hitler would have his people go around and steal the acoustic weapons that were used to fight the dragons and prevent strikes from the gods, fire bolts, heavenly lightning bolts from the gods, as they say, right? So they went around and collected all of the bells. Now, it's also interesting because they say that they also developed a machine that's shaped like a bell. If you guys have, you know, probably ever watched Ancient Aliens, I'm sure you've come across 1 or 2 episodes where they talk about the Nazi bell and how it was blue light came out of this machine, right? And strange lights were seen hovering in the area and stuff. They were working with plasma physics, right? I mean, keep in mind, he studied all the things that I reveal to you guys every day about plasma and the healing effects of it, time travel, and how you can live longer and everybody else lives shorter lives, stuff like that. But this is a bell graveyard right here. They went around collecting all of these, right? He definitely didn't want his enemies to have these weapons to protect themselves. Now, it's interesting because they had bell experts walk through these graveyards. The Nazis had bell experts that went through here, and the really good bells, which were the ones that were from the Middle Ages or the Dark Ages, they were not melted down. They were put on a truck and shipped off somewhere. Did you know that? It's true. Look it up. They kept all the really good bells for themselves, and then they returned those ones to their own people, or put them somewhere else. But regardless, they went on a bell scavenger hunt, looking for all of this ancient technology during a time of war when you don't want your enemies to be able to protect themselves, and you would like them to get struck, to have their fire, to have their own buildings set on fire, so that their places of power blow up. Their buildings that are full of gases, yeah, to get struck by lightning and blow up, right? To allow nature to do your work for you, in essence. Now, let's take it back to pop culture, as I like to do, right? We've got a recent movie called Troll, which I did a movie decode on. Pay attention to the movie. In the movie, they fight the troll using bells. They actually attach bells. See that bell right there? They attach bells to helicopters, and they fly them around this gigantic troll. Because trolls just hate bells, right? Why? Because trolls are seen as evil. And bells are holy technology, essentially. They represent God. They represent good or whatever, right? So there's a lot of different layers of symbolism that are happening here. Let me check my chat just real quick. Everything's good? Oh, cool. Hey, thanks for promoting my Patreon, Curry Croissant. That was kind. You're right. I do get 90% instead of 40. Now, I want to talk about the trolls. So in the movie Troll, they say that whenever the trolls showed up, actually, let me just cut right to the chase. I don't believe that the troll, as it's portrayed in the movie, and that many trolls throughout antiquity and myths were actual physical giant beings made of rock and moss and trees and vines and giant humans. I do believe in giant humans, okay? But I don't believe that's what trolls were specifically, right? In the movie, whenever a troll showed up, they said it smelled like hypernature. That's the exact word they used. Basically, it's the same smell you smell during or just before a rainstorm, a thunderstorm. Why? It's because of the air being ionized. It's the freshest air you can smell. And they say that shows up right before the trolls show up, right? The trolls are akin to electromagnetics and electromagnetic activity, specifically focused areas of focused plasmas in a time, during these times, whenever the atmosphere was electrically charged. That's what the trolls were. Trolls were said to be able to, they thought that trolls just hated Christians because they could smell the blood of Christians, just like dragons and other fantastic creatures. Hey, Melinda, thank you so much for your donation. That's very kind of you. So it's not that the giants and the trolls and whatever, they just really hate Christians just because they're abominations and God hates abominations. There's truth to those stories, right? But we have to separate the things that were misunderstood, which is plasma and plasma physics, among other things, from the things that were understood, like actual humanoid giants and gigantism. To separate those two instead of projecting one upon the other. Sometimes they were really giants. Other times they were not giant human beings at all. They were giant things that had legs that branched out and sometimes almost arms and looked like, a nervous system in the sky. But they weren't humanoid. They weren't physical in the same sense that we are. They're physical plasma creatures. Anyways, so they're fighting the plasma with the bell, right? Also, I talk about plasma possession. This is from one of the Spider-Man movies where Spider-Man has this symbiote costume or whatever. To me, it's plasma. Okay, I know that there's other elements to this, like viruses and stuff like that. But this is also showing you plasma and how people can become plasma possessed, or their auras can be taken over by another type of charge or a similar type of charge that just amplifies their negative their natural negativity, right? He crashes into the bell, and he starts to be able to break away from this this alien plasma that's wrapped around his body, right? This is what plasma does, okay? It is attracted to other electromagnetic phenomenon, which is you. You have a spirit and a soul, which is an electromagnetic phenomenon. You have chakras and auras, and you give out different layers to your spirit, right? And plasma, depending on its charge, will come seek you. It will come find you. It wants to merge with you. It wants to ground and dock and connect with you. And so giant balls will roll your way like an Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. You'll have giant red rolling balls of ball lightning, plasma, that will slowly start getting closer and closer to you. And if you run, it'll speed up because it's just electromagnetics, right? That we have forgotten about. We don't know how to describe it, so it becomes cartoons. It becomes movies and fantasy and old wives' tales and stuff. It's a Wonderful Life. My favorite Christmas movie. My number one, probably. I think it's probably my number one favorite Christmas movie. So at the end, there's this classic scene where she says, "Look, Daddy, teacher says every time a bell rings, an angel gets its wings." So let's talk about the bells ringing and how they affect the quote-unquote angels, angelic beings. This right here is an image of what I believe to be an angel, right? Not a human that has bird wings behind it, but angelic creatures, phenomenon that was not understood. People just call things that they don't understand when they don't have no idea how they work at all. They call it a phenomenon. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that, as long as you acknowledge that you have no idea what it is. That's what angels are. Angels are phenomenons. This is a phenomenon, okay? What you're looking at is called a sprite, which is the same word as spirit. This is called a transient luminous event in today's world, in our modern history, right? But there's different parts to it. Down here, you notice that it splits into two, like it has legs. These are called blue jets, or jets. They also call these, you ready for this? The legs of these giant angels are called trolls. I swear to God. So yes, every time a bell rings, it affects this plasma filament, giving it wings, right? This percussion instrument, this weapon to fight the demons in the air. Now, angels, it depends on your perspective. If you like it, you'll call it an angel. If you don't like it, you're going to call it a demon, okay? But these are this one and the same thing, right? And I've just did a couple videos where I was talking about these and how they're related also to the Anunnaki and their horned helmets and all that stuff too. But these are angels, right? This is why they're always wearing dresses or skirts or whatever, however they show them, robes and stuff like that, right? But these would walk. These would troll, which is to drag along the land or to drag on the land. Dragon. Purposefully. I chose those words purposefully. They would walk across the land. Now, we don't live in a time right now where the atmosphere is electrically amplified. There's no ambient electrical charge that's real powerful and as strong as it used to be during the Dark Ages today. But that time will return. And people will see these. During those times, these stay up there. Right now, they just flash. Somebody left me a comment saying like, I never seen one of these. Well, you gotta watch quick. These are split-second phenomena in today's world. People are starting to see them more and more. But in the time to come, in the time that once was, these would stay up in the air. This right here is a glimpse. This would just be a quick flash in today's world. But in a time whenever the atmosphere was electrically charged, these, in their different forms and different structures, the lower you get to the ground, they'll appear differently, okay? And then take on different forms. And the higher up they are, and also during which part of the plasma apocalypse you're in, if you're before, during, or after, and how far after, they'll also take on different forms. Also, your area and how close they are to places of power, and what types of gases they're eating up will affect their color and their composition, right? But people looked up and they saw beings that looked like this. They look like stick figure people with elongated heads. And if you ring a bell, and these things are real low to the ground, you can imagine, right? They're descending. They're getting closer and closer. You ring that bell, bong, bong, or it's ringing itself, and it's going to affect these things as the pressure waves go up and through these, right? If you could blow wind at these things and it would affect them. Okay, they're easily affected by turbulence in the atmosphere. So you ring that bell and these start growing wings, meaning that their electrical charge will start growing upwards and away from wherever the bell's coming from, which is below. So it's going to make it go upward like that. And the quote unquote angels will get their wings every time a bell rings. Here it is again. And you can see that it's got legs. Like, this is one of the more powerful ones that I've ever seen, right? And I love that it splits down in two so that you can see this. In the ancient times, this would just walk across the land. It would move about, attracted to, you know, places that have conductive materials or whatnot, right? And these are titans. These are massive, gigantic beings. People saw women, they saw angels, they saw serpents, they saw horned animals, they saw birds, they saw all kinds of things. Pareidolia, right? They saw angels. Look, that's a face. These are spirits, and they're shapeshifters too, as were the trolls. Okay, trolls were magical. They weren't just dumb giant humans. Trolls had magic power. They could shapeshift. They could increase in size. They could stretch to gigantic proportions or shrink down. They had abilities. They could possess people, and they could do all kinds of interesting things. Right? Those were the trolls. Actually, let me look up the word troll real quick. Let's look up the word troll. I'll tell you the etymology. So it comes from trollen, which means to go about, to stroll about, or to wander. These are the wanderers, okay? These types of electromagnetics were free. They weren't restricted to their places of power, which are the geoplasmas that come up out of the earth. Those can't just come up out of the earth and just walk around because they'll lose their power source. These ones are just fueled from the ambient electrical field in the atmosphere, and they're coming down from above. This is the glory of the heavens. These are the heavenlies. Troll, also to roll from side to side, trundle. To wander, to go in quest of game without purpose. These were wanderers. Ultimately from a Germanic source that says trollen, which means to walk with short steps. It also means to sing, like when you troll your voice, or trill, right? To sing in full, a rolling voice. This is electromagnetics. You don't think this makes sound? Of course. You hear lightning, right? Well, imagine a constant lightning that doesn't go away, that has different, sizes within it. Its structure. It's going to produce tunes, not just thunder. This is going to make music. I mean, it depends on how you define music, but this is going to make all kinds of sounds. Sometimes they can make the sound of screaming, or what sounds like screaming. Sometimes they can make the sound of singing, or music, or rushing waters, or static. Also from the word trail or trawl, which means to drag on the ground, right? Of bells, to give forth a full, mellow, reoccurring cadence. The geoplasmas also make sound. They're singing swords, right? So the beams that shoot up from within the caves and stuff, they're singing swords. That's where the concept comes from. So let's take a look at these dragons, these angels, these demons. The bells. If these would attack a town, they didn't care if they previously saw them as angels or not. They're going to be demonic in the eyes of the church, and they're going to ring those bells. Right? Yeah, check these out, man. I just wanted to really look at some of these. I mean, you can see like faces. You can see like places where there would be eyes, elongated skulls, collars, legs. You could really see people in there. So here's some different transient luminous events, okay? Now, these all existed during the Dark Ages, and existed more the further back in time we go, cyclically, right? There's times when we didn't have these and times when we did. We live during a time where we don't, but they're starting to peek their little heads up, and people are starting to see them more and more. Let's start with the top one and pay attention to the names. The top one, these halos, this is the reason why people have halos in ancient artworks. It's because halos existed. Actual halos of light existed in the sky above these angelic beings called sprites, or spirits, same exact word, right? So we have elves. So those halos, they didn't call them halos. They call them elves. Well, that's interesting. We have red sprites, which are spirits. Today, well, sometimes they'll call them blue jets or blue starters if they're like a little electrical crackle. At the bottom, we have pixies. You see those? Let me see if I can find a better pixie one. Yeah, right here. You see that? You know what pixies are? Foo Fighters. They're balls of plasma. They're literally, what do you call it? Electric, ball lightning. Pixies are ball lightning. Little flashes, little Tinker Bells, or whatever. Blue starters, blue jets, sometimes looks like a big old face in the sky. Right? Wilson. Let me shrink this up a bit. Red sprites, these are the angels with the halo above them. You see that? These tendrils, also, sometimes they call those tendrils. Sometimes these look like jellyfish. Right? They can take on many different shapes. Sometimes they look like elongated heads of aliens or whatever, light beings. Sometimes jellyfish, which is why I have that. They're actually called jellyfish sprites sometimes. And I mean, these ones aren't even jellyfish ones. The jellyfish ones look really exactly like ethereal spiritual jellyfish in the sky. It's amazing. So that seeps into our pop culture. Video games. I'm sure you guys have seen floating jellyfish in video games that are like in the sky or in space or whatever. Skyrim has them. Troll jets. See, check this out. Trolls. Gnomes. Trolls. You see that? The bells were weapons. They were Antiquetech to fight against this. This that you're looking at, all these forms, was happening everywhere. All over the earth, but especially in the areas that you now call dragon lines and ley lines and places of power and stuff, right? People looked outside and just saw this. You didn't have to perfectly time it with your Nikon camera or whatever. All right? People built structures to protect from these entities that made their way down and walked upon the earth, dragging along the earth, trolling themselves from place to place, wandering about, almost aimlessly. But really, they're following electrical currents. And they're also Valkyries. These things would kill people. They would go forth, they could see people's spirit, like the Predator has his Predator vision. These things see the electromagnetic spectrum, because they are the electromagnetic spectrum. They can see your soul. They know if you're good or bad. Okay? And they're not killing you or attracted to you or whatever because you're good or bad, because they really hate bad people or they really love good people. They're just electromagnetically repulsed by or attracted to frequencies, right? Electromagnetic currents. That's what really that boils down to. Check these ones out. This is another really good one. This looks like it's in Colorado, actually. I don't know. But look, this is real pictures, not AI. All right, I went to the guy's website. He's a professional photographer who purposefully looks for sprites and blue jets and transient luminous events to capture them, and lightning. You see that? Imagine in a world whenever these don't just flash, but they stay there in the sky, and you want them to go away, to go to some other city, leave our city alone. So you make these designs in architecture, right? And you you repel the evil plasmas, the evil spirits, and you call forth the good ones from within the earth, the geoplasmas, and you fill your cathedrals, your cathode parts of your Antiquetech, and you go immerse yourself and you bathe in the holy glory of God that is coming up from within the earth, rising from the grave. And you demand that the red spirits, the devils, right, the demons, flee from you. This makes its way into our pop culture, right? One obvious example is Stranger Things, the Mind Flayer, which possesses people also, right, as this will. But you've also got the Electric Man from Raising Dion. He's like literally a giant that looks like a person, but he's just an electric field. Many people have told me that it looks like these things, these sprites, they look human because it looks like they have a nervous system. Like that's what it looks like. It looks like if, you could see through a person, it's their nervous system. But if you pay attention, I do a segment called Truth in Movies. We reveal these truths to ourselves. They're not forgotten. They're not lost. They're there in the ambient electrical field that resonates throughout all of us still to this day. We've just distracted ourselves. That's all. What's up, Sassafras Griffin? That was our presentation for today. The Antiquetech of Ancient Bells. I would love for you guys to go check out my Patreon. I lowered the price to $1 for membership here on YouTube. That's why so many people are joining to be members. But if you guys want to support me, or if you ever have, or if, you don't have to, there's no pressure, but this is my full-time job. This is how I take care of my son and be a dad, which is really all I care about. I don't care about anything else. I just care about being a dad. That's my whole purpose for living and being, is giving my son and daughter good memories to grow up with and to have and to hold on to. I want to provide them some value. That's also why I do these videos. All my videos are actually for them. If you guys benefit from them, sweet. I think that's cool too. We're all family, some of us. But if you guys want to help me out and support my work financially, then go check out my Patreon. So I've got some tiers. You can be in the credits, right? And we're going to have way bigger names in the credits. And I've also got a class that I'm signing up that's bi-weekly, where I'm going to be doing video conferences with 9 of you every month. And what else? There's like chats. So the live chat that all you guys are using right now, there's chats that I've created on my Patreon where you can go and leave comments, and you can actually post pictures and stuff too. So you guys can start a collection of images that you found, like Antiquetech or whatever. Maybe there's actually a whole old world chat on my Patreon. So if you want to go post pictures and proofs or articles or blogs or whatever of anything old world related, all the way back to the medieval times, come pay me a visit, and we'll see what you got. We'll put our minds together. Anyways, I appreciate you guys just tuning in, and high five to everybody that was here today and a part of the presentation. Until next time, I'm JayDreamerZ saying good vibes and goodbye.
But something's forcing me to stay. It'd be easier on me if I turn away to flee. But there's something holding on in the way being long gone. There's so many ways to escape, but I guess it's time to wake up, time to wake up. Find so many ways to escape, but I guess it's time to wake up, time to wake up. I'll try so hard to fade away, but something's forcing me to stay. It'd be easier for me if I turn away to flee. But there's something holding on in the way of being long gone. There's so many ways to escape, but I guess it's time to wake up, time to wake up. Far too many ways to escape, but I guess it's time to wake up, time to wake up. Time to wake up, time to wake up.